right.
Thank you. Take it away, Kaylee.
All right. After more than 20 years in sales and public relations for companies including Analog Devices and Lipton Tea, Janet Parnes' definition of fulfilling career changed. She switched tracks to attend the Protocol School of Washington. Janet now equips her clients and skills that help them flourish personally and professionally. Janet has brought her social conversation and professional etiquette programs to universities, including Framingham State, as well as businesses and industries that span from STEM to real estate. Her passions include biking and hiking. Also a professional storyteller, Janet peppers her events with etiquette and trivia tales. As she says, to make a serious impact, sometimes it's best to lighten things up.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Yeah.
Thank you. I made a call once that boomeranged, but in a good way. I called an agency to talk about a program on conversation skills. The receptionist put me in touch with somebody. We had a chat. I sent information. Long story short, they said, we don't think this is really for us. 4 months later, I was at a networking meeting. I met a woman from this company. I told her about the program. She said, oh, I think that could be really of interest. Talk to so-and-so and tell her I referred you. So I called so-and-so. Within a week, the workshop was scheduled. Are you familiar with the expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know? Anybody hear that?
Mm-hmm.
We can have all the expertise there is, whether it be medicine, education, IT, all the knowledge there is to know. But if we don't have the connections, the relationships that help us move forward, we stay smart and we stay stuck. So today you're going to learn some conversation skills you can use to create the connections that will help you launch your career and move it forward. A couple of points. We don't seem to be, if you find this noise in the background, please mute yourself. If you have a question, just raise your hand, because there are a few of us here that I'll be able to see you. And if you wish to take notes, feel free to do so. Keep in mind, however, that the session is being recorded. So I think now I'm going to share. Share. There we go. Okay, it's coming up in the middle. Why is it coming up in the middle? Let me see if this back's okay. Okay. So you're going to learn some conversation skills. When I think about making connections with people, this quote comes to mind. Let me get this thing up. Is anyone familiar with this quote? If you haven't heard it, you will. You will in time. It's a venerable old quote. So it sounds, for people to do business with me, and that includes hire and promote, all I have to do is get them to know and like me and trust me. But how do you get someone to like and trust you? Here is a way of doing it. We can make someone feel valued, understood, and heard in seconds. And you'll learn how to do that today. These are you'll learn how to do that within the umbrella of these particular topics. When I talk about making connections and having conversations, I always have to bring up the forget factor. When we speak to someone, they forget 50% of what we said immediately, 75% of what we said. If the remaining 25%, the reason for that 40% is that we remember in bites. So we fill in the gaps with our own prejudices, opinions, experiences unwittingly. It's a similar concept to the telephone game. The first conversation barely resembles the final conversation. So you can look at this and say, well, why do I bother opening my mouth? You can look at it and say, I better make the conversations more impactful. Because think about it, when we speak, someone's forgetting most of what we say, but when someone speaks to us, we're also forgetting much of what they say. How can someone feel valued, understood, and heard, in other words, connected to us, if we're not listening? So the first topic I'm going to address is listening. There's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. What is the message here? Just raise your hand if you wish to answer. Anybody? Okay, I'll answer that. We're supposed to, generally it says, listen twice as much as you speak. But there can be impediments to listening. There are all kinds of distractions. It's the bright buckle on somebody's shoes. It's the hat that you like. It's the rainbow outside the window. It's your name that you hear from 15 feet away. In addition, we hear more quickly than we speak. So when someone's speaking to us and we're listening, we're always waiting for them to catch up. And as a result, of course, we can become distracted. So how can we prevent that? Well, one way I like to prevent distraction is to draw pictures as the person's speaking. Particularly if you're a visual person, this will work really well. If someone's talking about the presentation they're going to be giving on Abraham Lincoln, as they're speaking, picture this person in front of a group with good old Abe standing tall beside them. It will help us to remember the input. In addition, we want to practice whole body listening, and drawing pictures will help with this. While someone's speaking, we want to be attuned to what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What words am I hearing? What am I seeing? What are the facial expressions? What are the gestures? And how is this person feeling? When we listen with our ears, our eyes, and our heart, we can step onto their turf. That's what allows us to create a connection. That's what allows us to respond in a way that's meaningful to them, that's memorable to them. What are the benefits of whole body listening? Well, first of all, it helps keep a conversation going. If we're actually listening to somebody, we realize that they're giving us fodder for responses. So we don't have to keep digging up questions and comments. We simply have to listen to what they're saying and then work off that, respond from that. All of this makes the conversation easier for us, and it makes it easier for the other person as well. So listening is the fundamental element of any quality conversation with anybody. So we're listening, we're ready to listen, prepared to listen. You walk up to somebody at a networking meeting. How do you start the conversation? You've never seen this person before. Or maybe it's an interviewer. Maybe it's a dean at your college, the university. How do you start? Keep in mind that people see us before they hear us. So immediately they start assessing us based on our appearance. What kind of image do we want to project? Take a look at these two. Both of these young women are professionally dressed, they're nicely dressed, but look at this message the body language is sending. This one sends a message, to the left, sends a message, I'm primed for failure. This young woman clearly feels confident. She's sending the message, I have this under control. And he probably believes it. She may actually be feeling this too. She likely is. There's a reason for that. Contrary to what I used to think, the part of our brain that processes emotions takes these cues from our body language. So let's say that you're going to be having a conversation with a dean. You think about this conversation, you think, oh, and your shoulders start to slump. The signal to the brain is, oh, I'm not sure about this, I'm scared. Take that same situation, think about the conversation with the dean, and throw your shoulders back and stand up tall. The message to the brain is, I have this under control. I'm gonna nail this. So what's the lesson from this? If you start to feel nervous, what do? Stand up straight. Just put your shoulders back, raise your head, and stand straight. In time, you will feel the confidence building. You don't have to worry about changing your emotions. Just change your posture. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, let me see. Make sure everybody. Okay, good. If you have any questions, actually you can just speak up and I'll hear you. Okay, let me see. Okay. Now we want to introduce ourselves. The current trend seems to be introducing ourselves by using first name only. To me, that's like beckoning someone to cross the bridge and halfway through, they realize the bridge is incomplete. I find myself saying, so saying to myself, so what's your last name? Give me the rest of the story. In addition, there are practical reasons to introduce ourselves by our first and last names. I was at a networking meeting once. I met two women from a very large company that was of interest to me. They introduced themselves as Emma and Jennifer. I made the mistake of not saying, and your last names? I figured to myself, well, we'll exchange business cards and I'll have their last names eventually. Well, there was some kind of kerfuffle that happened. And we ended up splitting up before we had a chance to exchange cards. Now, I have this huge company and I don't have these women's last names. So I had to dig and dig and dig. Had I not been so interested in connecting with them, I never would have. So if you want people to follow up, we have to include our last names. Make it easy for them. So we're standing face to face with someone we barely know. How do we start the conversation? We start with small talk. What is small talk? Can anybody identify small talk? Oh, whoops. Doing the wrong thing. Okay. No, okay. Small talk it's fluff talk. It's light, easy conversation. It's the traffic. It's the weather. It's the movie you saw. It's the garden you just planted. Small talk consists of topics that are really easy to talk about. Its purpose is to find common ground, so you have a topic on which both of you can talk for a few minutes. That helps put everybody at ease. It's like a portal you walk through in order to engage in more meaningful conversation. Now, I think we often refer to small talk as fluff talk, but it's actually a big deal. How can we possibly make someone feel valued, understood, and heard? In other words, connected to us, if they're not at ease? Small talk puts everybody at ease. So you may be thinking, so what do I talk about? What do I talk about? Well, here, Norm will come to the rescue. These are four suggested topic areas from which you can draw. I'm going to actually talk about two of them. One of them is recreation. Recreation could be the soccer game you attended, the soccer game you played. It could be movies, gardening, astronomy, your hobbies, anything that's fun. Generally, you'll find something about which the other person can talk. If they don't play chess, maybe they play soccer, maybe they like baseball. You'll eventually find something. The other is occupation. People are generally at ease talking about their job, particularly if they like it. You sometimes see people's face light up. They enjoy it. Your job occupation is now perhaps being a student. You may have another as well. At networking meetings, I used to ask, so what do you do? I asked this question up until the day I conducted a workshop at the Carroll School for the Blind. It was a workshop for adults entering and re-entering the workforce. There was a man there who had been in IT for 25 years. He had lost most of his sight. He said to me, you know, when I go to a networking meeting and people say, what do you do? I have to tell them, I've lost my sight. I've learned to live as a blind person. I have to find another job. He said, it's really hard for me to go through that. I'd really prefer people say to me, so what brings you here? Then I can say, oh, I'm here to meet people. I want to find out what people like about their professions, how they came to, what their journey has been. And I can morph into my particular situation. He said, it's much easier for me. So from that day on, I ditched, what are you doing? And I asked, what brings you here? So we have a conversation going with small talk. We started it up. How do we keep it going? We want to keep fuel in the tank. The best way to do this is to be curious. Ask the person about something they mentioned, whatever it may be. But showing interest in someone is a great way to make them feel valued, understood, and heard. A great way to build a connection. When we show curiosity, we show someone that we're interested. We show that we're giving them undivided attention. People feel great. Who doesn't feel great when we have someone's undivided attention? There are a few ways of doing this. To keep a conversation going, is ask open-ended questions. Anybody know what an open-ended question is? Anyone like to describe it? I'm sure you probably know what it is. Okay. An open-ended question is a question that requires someone to say more than yes or no. So instead of saying, do you like teaching, which would be a closed-ended question, and the person can say yes or no, and then you have to come up with another question. Instead of saying, do you like teaching, you would ask, what do you like about teaching? Then the person has to give you some information. Oh, I really like the kids. They're really fun. So what are some fun instances, circumstances you've had with the experiences you've had with the kids? So the open-endedness of the question allows the conversation to keep on going. Similarly, when someone else asks us a question, do you like teaching? Instead of saying yes, yes, I do. This is what I love about it. Give them something to work off of. Give them a launch pad. If we give each other a launch pad, we keep the conversation going. And it just makes the whole experience more pleasurable and easier for us. I have here also safe subjects. Oh my, we're talking to someone we barely know. We don't want to bring up politics. We don't want to bring up religion. We don't want to bring up explosive topics. We want the conversation to be comfortable and easy. So stay with safe subjects. If your question is subject, move on to another one. If you question whether a subject is safe. So we started a conversation with small talk. We're listening, practicing whole body listening. The conversation is, it's feeling like it's as if it's time to wrap it up. That can be an awkward thing to do. There is a way to do it, however, that can make someone feel valued, understood, and heard. They can continue that connection you started with at the beginning. So I'm going to give you two scenarios. One of them is this, the typical scenario, the typical way to wrap up a conversation. Extend your hand. That's extending your hand for a handshake is a universally recognized signal that you're bringing the conversation to an end. So extend your hand. Something like, it's been nice meeting you. Why don't we email each other? We can meet for coffee, something like that. Or we can do this. I never realized that dentists download a meditation in order to calm down a nervous patient and themselves. This has been a fascinating conversation. I hope to see you again. So which ending, the first or the second, is going to make that other person feel valued, understood, and heard to create a connection? The first one or the second one? Just put up your fingers. Second one, yes. Yes, why? Why? Because the other person feels valued, understood, and heard. The other person leaves feeling they had our complete, undivided attention. Of course, there's going to be a connection. So what's the moral of the story? Somebody can, if you're more comfortable typing into the chat, you can do that. Do I have to find the chat? Okay. No, okay.
Hi, this is Lori. I would say give some specifics about the conversation that you just spoke of so they'll remember you with your face and your name.
That's exactly it. Give some specifics about the conversation. As they're speaking, key into something they said, something that resonates with them, and save it, tuck it away so that you can bring it up as a transition to wrapping up the conversation. Now, obviously, if someone mentioned it was a sunny day, you don't want to wrap up the conversation. Oh, it's a sunny day. No, no, no. Find something that resonated with them that they feel is important. So we spend a lot of times texting and emailing, a lot of time on our digital devices, which means that for some of us, having conversations does not come as naturally as it could. So we want to practice. There's all kinds of opportunities to practice having conversations with people we either barely know or don't know at all. Take, for example, when you're back at school, the custodian, someone working in the kitchen, not when they're flipping pancakes, but when they have a moment to speak. Look at the people around us and take opportunities to just have a short conversation. So if the custodian might be, so what brought you to Framingham State? What do you like about it? How long have you been here? And not just hi, have a conversation. Tell the person a little bit about you. Think about it. If you're working away and someone takes the time and trouble to stop and acknowledge you. How do you feel? You feel great. You feel valued, understood, you feel heard. You feel a connection to that person. Also, with us in acknowledging the person, we feel great too. So that small gesture elevates both of us. It elevates everybody. And as I said, spend time, not just a hi, hello. There was something else I was going to say about this too. I can't think of it, but it might come to me later. So does anybody have any questions about listening, about making small talk, about wrapping up a conversation or beginning a conversation? Are there any questions? You can either type them into the chat or simply speak. No, all set? Okay, is it all pretty clear? Nod your heads, yes, no? Okay, good, good, good. So of course we all, when I was your age, conversations were face-to-face or by phone. There were no other options. Now, of course, we have the option to speak to people and have conversations digitally, both written and verbal. So with the written digital conversations, note that they place more distance between us than a phone call or a face-to-face conversation. And that can present problems. Take a look at this finding, this data. People ended the relationship with the company because they didn't feel valued, understood, and heard. They didn't feel connected. So we want to be able to use our digital devices in a way that creates connections instead of clipping them. So here are some suggestions, okay? If we want to connect with someone, we have to give some thought as to the vehicle to use. Don't, oh, I'll just email her. Oh, I'll just text him. No, no, no. Give some thought. What is the best vehicle to use? What is the vehicle that is going to create a connection? The first consideration is recipient preference. How does that person want to be communicated with? How do they want to receive their communications? Are they just the facts type, so a quick text will be perfect for them? Are they the type of person that would read the text and say, oh, I wish you had called me. I'd really like to speak to you. They want a more warm, personal approach. This is critical if you're dealing with prospects and clients. It's critical to making them feel valued, understood, and heard. It's critical to making connection. It's important with everybody, but particularly with prospects and clients. Know the way they want to communicate. If you don't know, ask. People will tell you. In addition, consider the nature of the message. If the message is just confirming a 5 o'clock call, a text is probably fine as long as the recipient is happy with it. Go with the text. If the message is, what do you think about the decision they made to turn the park into a community center? That conversation is probably going to be layered. It's sensitive. It's going to be full of passion, probably. It's not, and it's as such, it's going to be open to misinterpretation. So that is the type of conversation. What vehicle do you want to use with that type of situation? How would you want to communicate with someone? Would it be face-to-face, phone, email, text? What do you think would be best with a message that's layered, nuanced, and easily misinterpreted?
In person.
In person, yes. A personal, either the phone or if possible, face-to-face. You want the most personal type of connection that you can have. This became clear to a friend of mine. He's a business consultant. A company who was a client called him and said, George, you got to come in. We've got this intractable problem. We have 2 VPs who are knocking heads. They can't seem to come together on a resolution. Can you help? So George went to the company. He spoke to both of the VPs. He asked both of them, so what's come up in your conversations? They both said, conversations? Oh, we don't talk to each other. We just email. Now, they were literally down the hall from each other. So George took the 2 of them, dragged them into a conference room, sat them down across from each other and said, talk. So the 2 of them hashed it out. Because they had the advantage of voice inflections, facial expressions, body language, and just even the physical nearness, the physical closeness of the 2 of them, they were able to hash it out and they came to understand each other and come up with a resolution. but it required a personal touch. So be very conscious of this when you're texting or emailing. Is this the right vehicle for the message I want to send? If there's a question, pick up the phone. Any questions about this? Okay. Oh, the smartphone. Oh, yeah, there are lots of smartphone traps. Our smartphones are a part of us. We walk around with them all the time, and most of the time they're on, particularly for walking ourselves. But the mode in which we have our phone should be a result of a decision. If we're speaking with people, even one person, we need to make the decision, ask ourselves, which is more important, the call or my colleague? Once you're in a conversation with someone and your phone rings, the conversation is cut. Once you pick it up and answer that call, the conversation has ended. So keep that in mind. Is the person calling who can leave a voicemail, is that the more important person, or is it the person standing in front of me? Now, that said, sometimes it's the call that's the most important. Maybe there's a very important call you're expecting and you can't easily return it. In that case, you'd say to the person with whom you're speaking, I have this really important call coming in. I'm afraid I have to take it. If your phone rings, excuse yourself, take the call, and then leave and take the call to a private place. By leaving, that gives the other person the freedom to move on. I don't know if you've ever been in the situation I have. I'm talking with someone, they pick up the phone, they're chatting away, and I'm left standing there wondering, is the call going to be a 10-second call, so I should stay here, or is it going to be a 5-minute call, so I should leave? And I feel rude leaving, but this person's leaving me no choice. It puts us in an awkward situation. So consider which is more important, the call or your colleague. If the call is more important, explain up front that you must take the call, and that just to make that conversation comfortable for both of you. There's also a study done by Virginia Tech. They studied people who have, usually if they see this at dinner or at meetings, people are sitting there around a table and everybody's phone is out. The study showed that when phones are inside, even in off mode, there's still a distraction. At some level, everybody's waiting for their phone to ring. So when we're sitting with other people, if we want to be able to give them our undivided attention, if we want to be able to make them feel valued, understood, and heard, if we want to connect with them, the phones need to be out of sight and off. Any questions? I have had debates on this at times with students, actually. Okay. Email. If we want to project a professional image in our email, and if we are, as professionals, project a professional image to others, it's much easier to create a connection because they see us as being on their level, as being a peer. So if we want our email to look professional, ditch the emojis, and unless you know the person is going to understand the jargon, eliminate it and just say whatever it is that the jargon means. If you're emailing a colleague at work who's somebody you see all the time, you know them very well, an emoji is okay. But if it's not, do not include an emoji. It could make you look kiddish. The other tip is to use a salutation. Hi, hello, good morning. I joined a company once and I was receiving emails from people saying they would start off Janet. When I responded, I would respond, hi, Emma, hi, Bob. Guess what came back to me from virtually everybody? Hi, Janet. From then on, all the emails I sent and received began with hi, hello, good morning, good afternoon, some kind of salutation. Clearly, people like this. Why? What is a salutation? Just something as simple as hi. What does that do to an email? How does that change the feel of an email? It warms it up. It makes it more personal. It's a very subtle way of making someone feel valued, understood, and heard by acknowledging them. We build a connection by acknowledging others. So simple as can be, when you email someone, use a salutation, include a salutation. Well, in these days, where we used to have meetings at school, classes at school, meetings at work, now everything is being done remotely. But remote meetings are becoming a trend anyway, simply because we have a worldwide economy. We're a global society. However, there are certain considerations that are important when video conferencing, considerations we don't necessarily have to consider in a face-to-face meeting. I just have a few of them here. The first is attire. We may be working from home, but we're still at work. So we need to dress the part. If we want to send the message that we consider this meeting to be important, and we consider our other participants to be important, we need to dress as if it's important. Then the background. If we have a stack of books, pile of papers, and a barking beagle in the background, how is anyone going to be able to feel valued, understood, and heard by us? They're going to be too distracted. We're going to be distracted. So it's important to be sure that your background is clean. It doesn't have to be sterile, but it has to be clear of distractions. And then positioning the computer. Raise the computer up a bit so that the webcam is just about level with your eye. The reason is this. I know we're told to make eye contact, to look at the person we're speaking to in the eye. When we're video conferencing, the webcam is the eye. If we look into the computer camera, the participants will perceive that we're looking at them in the eye. Otherwise, if we look at the participants in the screen, you can see I'm looking down. Sometimes people looking away, they can be looking up, they can be looking sideways. I've seen it all. So when we're speaking to the group, we want to be looking at the camera. And that covers where to look. So we've talked about listening, we've talked about small talk, how to start a conversation, keep a conversation going, wrap up a conversation. We've talked about use of digital devices. So if you think about the skills and techniques that you've learned, if you practice these, are you going to change the course of civilization overnight? Are they going to propel you to your 10-year goal in 2 weeks? No, probably not. They're details. But as Arthur Conan Doyle understands, or understood, I suppose, it's the details that are important. Just as it's the details in a room that give the room its feel, it's these details in our conversation that give it its feel, that help us make others feel valued, understood, and heard, and create a connection. So I'm wondering, does anybody have questions, comments? I'm going to stop the share, I think. Points to debate?
I do.
Yes, Wendy.
I have the terrible habit of stepping over people's sentences. I never wait till somebody's finished speaking until I interject my thought or my opinion. So I'm going to heed very closely what you've shared with us today and do my best to not do that anymore.
Wendy, I have to restrain myself from interrupting you. I have something I want to say, and I just want to say it. I want to put it out there. It really takes discipline. Especially if we're on a video conference, there's a bit of a lag time. So we need to give a couple of seconds to be sure that the person's finished speaking. And that's also true in face-to-face conversation. Give a couple of seconds, and it absolutely takes discipline. I don't know whether it can become a habit or not. I'm guessing that it can. But I know if I'm excited, I can step right in, and then I end up saying, I just interrupted you, didn't I? So it takes vigilance, and more so for some of us than for others. Yes.
Can I say one more thing? I just want to say, and somebody once told me there's nothing wrong with a pause in the conversation, that I as an individual don't have to immediately rush right in and fill that empty void.
Not at all. Actually, when someone finishes speaking and we pause, which I just did not do, it gives the listener time to everybody time to digest which has just been said. So, and pauses, I have a whole section on pauses. There was no time for today, but pauses actually are, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad actually you brought it up, Wendy. Pauses are really beneficial. A pause gives the speaker time to organize information so we speak more coherently. A pause gives the listener time to digest the information. We can use a pause to build anticipation. When I was talking about, what was I talking about? About first introducing ourselves by first and last name. I said it's like beckoning someone across a bridge, and then the person finds this. Are you waiting to hear what I'm going to say? Yeah, the bridge is half finished. So we can. There are many uses for a pause. Sometimes it feels to us that we're pausing for an hour and a half, but it doesn't feel that way to the other person, not at all. So a few second pause is perfectly fine. In fact, often when we pause, people assume we're thinking about that which they just said. So I'm glad you raised this, Wendy. Don't be afraid of a pause. Use them. And so someone said to me, well, when do you pause? I asked a friend of mine who was a speech pathologist. She teaches presentation skills. She says you pause at the end of the sentences and you pause at the commas. So we don't have to plan our pauses. We just have to allow them to happen naturally. Dawn.
Awesome as always. I love it. We got to get you back to do another dinner or something. But I wrote this in the chat. I don't know about the handshakes from now on because, I mean, we've been, trained for that last February, March, not to do handshakes. And until this thing is well over, I don't know if handshakes will be coming back.
No, Dawn, thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely, thank you for bringing that up. We do not shake hands until the governor says it's okay to shake hands. I'm not sure, but until it's safe, we do not shake hands. So if anybody, sometimes someone might out of habit extend their hand, you can just, COVID-19, and immediately they'll understand. So do not, under any circumstances, put yourself or anyone at risk to shake hands.
And definitely hugs are out from now on.
Yeah. And hugs in a professional.
You're killing me.
I know, I'm a hugger. You know me.
Well, hugs are, when you know somebody well in a professional setting, it's perfectly fine. If someone, sometimes, I don't know, sometimes men you might find the stray man who tends to hug. You don't even know this person, and it's perfectly fine to put up your hands. If you don't want to be hugged, you do not have to be hugged. Just put up your hands.
Right. And now especially.
Oh, now especially. No, you can't hug now. No, you can't hug now. The hug from 6 feet away.
Yeah.
Are there any other?
I just wanted to say this was very insightful, especially for us college students going in for interviews for future employers. I know that I talked to my mom's bosses when I would go into her work, and the one thing they would say during interviews is that our generation, we're so used to always like on our phone that when we have a face-to-face conversation with someone, they don't see that connection at all. And the one thing that they do need to see is them being able to collaborate and network with others, since they'll be partnering with different people in different parts of the company. So this is very insightful. Just want to say.
Thank you, Kaylee. And you raised a couple of good points. One word that I particularly keyed in on was collaboration. In order to be successful in whatever career we're in, unless you're going to be in a dungeon by yourself, you're going to have to collaborate with somebody. And how can we collaborate if we can't talk? So again, and Kaylee, it was either you or Alyssa during our meeting last week that talked about having conversations with the custodian, having conversations with the person in the dining hall. Yeah. And again, this point came up in that which you just said, Kaylee. It gives us opportunities to become more adept at having conversations, be more at ease at having conversations with people we don't know well. We find it, we'll enjoy it. That the benefits will pay off during interviews and of course when you're stepping in your career. And all of these tips also, they apply to personal conversations as well. Even, I can see heads nodding. Even in our personal lives, it's the relationships we have. It's the connections we build that help us move towards whatever our personal goals are. So these are universal.
That actually brings up a question that I just thought of. But do you have any advice on kind of going out of that comfort zone that a lot of us have because of not having a lot of personal conversations? Do you have any advice on how to get out of your comfort zone and actually initiate a conversation with someone?
Okay. So how, are you asking how to initiate the conversation or how to get over that feeling of?
Yeah, that feeling.
Okay. Stand tall. You know, Alyssa, put your shoulder, envision yourself talking to that person, straighten your shoulders and stand tall. You will start to feel confident. And I do a lot with mindset work for myself. I do a lot with envisioning. If I have a phone call with someone and I'm feeling that they're a little bit bigger than I am, you know, or I'm feeling, because of that, I'm feeling a little bit intimidated, I'll stand up before making the call. I'll go through the entire conversation standing up and throwing my shoulders back. Because when I do that, the message that sends a signal to my brain, you have this under control. I would say a tip is to prepare yourself for the conversation. Have some topics at the ready that you can raise. And of course, remember that the better we listen, the more fodder we're going to gather for continuing the conversation. So I think with all of that helps. Just know that you're up to the task at head. You're going to stand tall. You envision yourself in the conversation. Prepare some topics to raise or some answers to questions that might be answered. So prepare yourself as best you can, and essentially know that you're up to this task. You know, you don't have to be glib. You don't have to have the gift of gab to have conversations that connect you to people. In fact, having the gift of gab can work against us. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone, and I know you have, who just doesn't stop talking? On and on and on. Okay. And you feel as if you're drowning in this blur of words, and we walk away remembering nothing. So the gift of gab is not a requirement whatsoever. It's just believe, picture yourself in the conversation, and be prepared. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Good. Anybody else? I could talk all day on I could talk all day on this. I could be one of those people who never stops talking, and you feel as if you're drowning in a sea of words. Well, then I thank everybody for coming. The session's being recorded, so you'll have the PowerPoint. At the end of the PowerPoint, you'll see my email address. I always say once a client, always a client. So at any point in time you have any questions, maybe you're going for an interview, maybe you're having a conversation with the dean, maybe you're going to a dinner, a business dinner, an important dinner, and you'd like some dining advice. I also teach that. Just come to me with questions. If I can't answer the question, I'll let you know. If it's out of my league or not within my purview, I'll let you know. But if it has to do with making others feel valued, understood, and heard, I can probably help you out. So in the meantime, thank you, everybody.